Therapeutic Day program. You got that?
Yeah.
Providing a therapeutic day program for folks with disabilities, age 18 and above, at day centers in Eureka and Fortuna. Today's episode of Lessons in Dementia is entitled Hoarding in Relation to Dementia. It is being presented by Maggie Kraft, Executive Director of Area 1 Agency on Aging. As a reminder, this live session is being recorded, and you can find this and past episodes on our website at www.senior.org, and we'll put a link to that in the chat for you. There'll be a brief survey at the end of today's presentation, and your response will help us to continue to provide content that's useful and relevant. We do thank you in advance for taking a moment to fill out that survey after the presentation. So I'm going to now turn it over to Caitlin. Caitlin, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin. I'm the Alzheimer Services Coordinator. And like Wendy said, today we have Maggie Kraft, the Executive Director of Area 1 Agency on Aging. Maggie's asked to start things off with maybe some of your questions that she can address for you. And so I'm going to pass it over to Maggie.
Here. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see some of my friends out there. And what I wanted to make sure, since this is an hour, just under an hour now, that before I get too far into a presentation, I want to really make sure that if there's anyone here with any burning specific questions that they want me to address, make sure I at least touch on. I want to get those written down so we don't end up at the end of the session and I haven't done that. So anybody have anything that they want, just in general terms, that you are hoping I will touch on today? Are you here to hear whatever you hear? Okay. All right. So I recognize some of the names in the room. I know some of the people here are people who work with families, and some of you are family caregivers. I just want to, is there another category of person that's in the room? Somebody maybe living with Alzheimer's or another dementia themselves? Any other types of folks? All right. No politicians or let's see, what else would there be? What other type of folk is there? All right, very well. Well, I'm going to start by, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to, and oh, by the way, if you do end up with questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. I know that Caitlin will be keeping an eye on that for me so that we'll have a place, because you may come up with questions as we go along. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and we'll see if this works. It's always nice when it does. Right. Right. So just a little bit about the Area Agency on Aging before we go too far. And now I have to make sure it actually moves. Hold on just a second. There we go. Okay. So we serve Humboldt and Donort counties, and we've been doing that since 1980. Our mission is to provide leadership and services that support and promote healthy aging. And this is the graphic of the service area that we serve. So as you well know, we're all up here in the northwesternmost part of the state, in very rural areas that do not always have all the resources that you might think are available in the big cities. But I do want to tell you and give a shout out to the Senior Center, my alma mater, so to speak. I used to work there. That for a rural community, for a small community, we have so many services that don't exist in other equal rural areas. So there are things that we have here like MSSP and the PACE program and the different adult day health programs and the meal programs. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we do here locally that places like Modoc County or Alturas or some of those other places just don't see the way we do. So we're really fortunate. That said, and we are missing and lacking some things too. And we all know, you know, our medical system is challenging in terms of finding medical care when we need it. So a lot of what you do as caregivers, both professional and family and friends, is you have to source your services and needs somehow yourself. And one of the best ways to do that is to be educated and learn as much as you can, so that often you'll become the person that knows more than anybody else you're talking to. So I'm hoping today that some of that I bring to you. Just real quick, that what area agencies do, because a lot of people don't really know what it is. We do a lot of different things. These are the 5 main things we do. We identify needs by doing assessments and surveys and talking to people in the community about what is not happening and what do we need to improve on. We also advocate on behalf of older adults. We provide some direct services, and we provide funding to other direct services or other services that we don't provide directly. And one of the groups we fund is the Senior Center for their nutrition programs. And then we have to monitor the use of all the funding that we get, so that we can report back to the state and federal government that we're not cheating and none of our programs are doing the wrong thing. So those are the main things we do. So let me get into it. I am going to, let's do something here, because I've lost track. I don't get to see you guys as much as I would like to here. There we go. There we go. I had it where I was seeing all my slides on both screens, and boy, that's silly. Okay, so I want to start today with what I'm going to be talking about is hoarding behaviors in relationship to dementia. Of course, when I do that, I can no longer move my slides along. Hold on a second. I'll get it, guys. It's only been, what, 3 years? So I wanted to start with a definition of what hoarding is, because there's a lot, you know, we all have seen the show Hoarders, and we all use the term, we throw it about, and it's not, I just want you to know what it really is. And so hoarding, if you're going to be diagnosed as a person with hoarding disorder, you are going to have all 3 of these situations. You're going to have to keep a lot of things, and even things that may be useless, and most other people might consider them useless. You're going to have your things in a space that it's filling up your space, so you're no longer able to use the space that you have for the intended purpose. And there's different levels of that, but generally speaking, you're not using the space the way it was intended. And that these items can cause distress or problems in day-to-day activities. And so what that means, distress, it could mean it ruins your relationships with other people, it causes financial problems, it causes health problems, it causes safety problems. So, so these things all have to be present in order to have a diagnosis of hoarding. You don't have to have a diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder. Hoarding does not, people who hoard don't necessarily have that diagnosis. But, you know, they used to think it went together, but you can have each diagnosis without having the other one. So that's the basic definition. So, and hoarding is different from collecting, although many people who hoard will try to make you believe that their things are collections, but often, and they may even have a collection hidden in there somewhere, but usually it's things are in disarray and they're not organized. And whereas collections, people usually proudly display their collections and keep them pretty well organized. So getting diagnosed with hoarding disorder, if you have another diagnosis that could explain the behavior, such as Alzheimer's or another dementia, then typically you're not going to get the hoarding diagnosis. So I'd like us to just start by saying, if we're caring for somebody with an Alzheimer's or other dementia diagnosis, let's not throw another diagnosis on top of that. Let's not say, oh, they also are a hoarder, because oftentimes some of this behavior in dementia is about the dementia, and I'll go into it in a little more detail, but let's just figure out how to address the behavior. Most times, for people strictly with dementia who start to do some of what we would consider collecting or even hoarding behaviors, most times it's relatively harmless. But I say that, obviously there are times where it goes beyond that, and that's where it gets to be challenging. If a person has previously been a person with a hoarding disorder, then the dementia overlay on top of that is certainly not going to make life easier. And they probably do have hoarding disorder and now also have dementia. And that is probably the most difficult combination. But I want to, so I'm not going to not talk about that, but some of what I'm talking about is really focusing on a person with dementia who may have behaviors around collecting and rummaging and things that cause caregivers challenges, or they don't want to let go of things. So, but does that make sense? That, I mean, you can be a person with hoarding disorder and then develop dementia and have that on top of it. But most people with dementia would not be diagnosed automatically as having hoarding disorder, because the dementia may be causing the behavior versus a new diagnosis. And it's rare that somebody in their 70s or 80s will be diagnosed with hoarding disorder. Hoarding disorder usually starts much younger. Most people, if they have this disorder, they're going to show signs of it when they're in their teens. And so it's not something that you just wake up one day and all of a sudden you have hoarding disorder. There's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot, and I can't even begin to go through all of this, but I just want you to know that generally speaking, if you're seeing these kind of behaviors in someone with dementia, a type of dementia, and they did not have a previous existing hoarding condition, likely you're looking at the behaviors caused by the confusion of the dementia. So in that context, a person with dementia, it's basically what some studies have shown, and what I think we know by experience, is that most behaviors that a person with dementia exhibits are really reflecting some internal need that they are no longer necessarily clearly articulating on telling you what their need is. One of the things that they've discovered with the limited studies that have been done around this is that that people with dementia are often looking for a sense of security, and that some of those hoarding behaviors give them that sense. And it's also, the other thing is, it's also for them in a way, it's providing them with meaningful and behavior, even though it may not seem meaningful to you. But it's definitely communication. And so if we start looking at what it might signify, and try to figure out how to, as in all caring for everyone with dementia, you're always trying to figure out, what does the behavior mean? And sometimes you have to put the behavior in the context of the disease. But around hoarding types of behaviors, you also have to put the behavior in the context of their life experiences, which is true for many behaviors in dementia. But in hoarding, there's some tells maybe that will help figure things out. So this is just really important to remember that behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, most of them reflect an underlying unmet needs. And we have to look hoarding in the same way. So I've got these different slides. I've got a lot of words on them, and I'm not going to read them to you. I'm going to go through them because you're all people who know how to read. I put these together so that I could make sure I didn't forget anything. But I think what I'd like to do is make these slides available to you guys to share with anybody. So if you want to get into the detail, you can. And I'm going to go through these, trying to hopefully touch on some points that really might be helpful. So why are people with dementia now hoarding? There's a lot of medical reasons. They talk about, the brain's changing, how how they're understanding their environment is changing. Also, they're not remembering, if they put something somewhere, they're not going to remember where they put it. That's an easy one. We all do that, right? And again, as I said before, some of these behaviors are about gaining security. There was one study I'll get to a little later that really saw that, you know, some of this behavior is about they need this. They're going to need this at some point. And because the brain's not quite working, they don't necessarily understand that, yeah, they can leave it where it is. They don't have to, or they don't need 10 of them or whatever. But the brain, you know, the brain isn't thinking as well as it did. So some of this is caused by the impaired thinking. They also might start hiding things, and I would see this when I was an ombudsman a lot in the nursing homes, is that, you know, people were all saying people were stealing from them. Well, that might also be true. And in addition, they might be hiding things to keep people from stealing them and then forgetting where they hid them, which reinforces the belief that someone stole it, right? I sometimes do that around my own house, but I always catch myself because I go, wait, there's no one else here. Nobody stole this. I put it someplace, but it's easy to go, where did, who, what? So the other thing, so when people stop recognizing the folks that are around them, there's an even more imperative to keep things safe. So if they go into a new setting, or they stop recognizing their caregivers, which can happen with dementia. You know, if you start seeing more of this behavior, it may be, you know, a cue that they're not recognizing what around them. Even stories about people, you know, they see somebody in the mirror and they don't recognize that person in the mirror. This is common with dementia. That's a stranger in the house, and you're going to hide. I do this. I look in the mirror every morning and I see my mother, which is shocking in and of itself, but I know she's not stealing from me. So I can, you know, but if you see someone and you don't recognize them, it can cause those behaviors. Also, they can touching the items, and you know, sometimes out of sight is out of mind. And so you got to keep touching your items to remember they're there. So that could be, you know, that rummaging, or always constantly looking for, you know, where is that, and putting things places, to just trying to keep track of it all. And they're just losing the control over these behaviors. They don't recognize, oh, I'm safe here, or oh, that's my wife, she's not stealing from me, you know. And then it all ties into, you know, this kind of cycle. You're afraid you're going to be robbed or you're going to lose things, so you hide things to keep them safe, and then you don't know where they are. You also, sometimes people can no longer distinguish between what should be kept and what should be thrown out. It's not like they're necessarily hoarding, but they can't discern or make that decision. You know, and the ability to even initiate new activities as dementia goes. That means they can't necessarily say, oh, I'm holding this, I don't want it, I should throw it out. That whole process, that whole chain of thinking gets broken with dementia. So sometimes people, you know, they put it someplace, then they confuse and put it someplace safe. Sometimes even being bored and not being able to start new activities can cause folks to do some of this stuff. So this is a study that I looked at, which I thought was pretty interesting. I'll just give you, the main thing the study found was that a desire for security seemed to be the underlying meaning of the hoarding behavior, that it was providing them a feeling of preparedness, and being prepared made them feel safer, because they knew they could take care, they believe they can take care of whatever's happening around them. And that gave them a sense of stability. Even though it may not have made any sense that those items needed to be hoarded. But some of it is going back to former situations. I mentioned this, if people have a previous hoarding disorder and then added to it the memory impairment, and you know, this is going to make things worse for sure. And they did find that people with previous kind of hoarding disorder tendencies, would definitely kind of get back into that. There's a lot of language on this. Like I said, this is mostly for me to put it all together. But the other thing is this study in Taiwan, people who lived very frugally in the past, and they tended to have very cautious personalities prior to their dementia. And so it made perfect sense for them to continue to be frugal and continue to be cautious. But they just couldn't distinguish anymore between the value or importance of the different items. So everything became something you had to hold on to. And the other one was, some of these people, we always have people say, well, the reason older people hoard is because they lived through the Great Depression and that's why people hoard. Well, if that were the case, then all of us would do it. Everybody who lived through that time period would hoard, and that would not explain why there are younger people who are hoarding. It's a complicated illness, but in the context of them looking at these older people with dementia, what they found when they looked at their lives was that they had placed a very high value on saving for a rainy day, and because of past what they call resource deficiencies, not having things, it became a way to maintain control still of your life and feel secure. So it really all came down to that. And I have to think about, post-World War II, the experience of people in Japan or Taiwan who are now of this age that we're talking about had to have been different than our experience after World War II here in this country. So, because the war took place on their land. So it could have even made things worse in terms of never wanting to be in a situation where you didn't have what you needed. So we have to shift. They're not going to change what they're doing. We have to shift what we're doing. And again, look at what's going on think about this. Okay, what is this? What are they trying to tell me? Always think about past experiences. The more you know, and if you're a family caregiver, especially if you're a family caregiver who's been married with this person and you've known their family for a long time, you have more treasure trove to dig into about where these behaviors might be coming from. It's a lot harder when you're a paid caregiver or a care manager or a friend who's just coming into the situation now. But the more you can really understand that person's, where they come from, their history, how they grew up, the more you can understand that, the more you can understand the behavior. And in this respect, you're trying to learn what the reason for the behavior, and not seeing it necessarily as a problem that needs to be eliminated. You're not going to be able to eliminate all behavior that is hard to deal with. You're not going to be able to eliminate all behavior that is around hoarding and keeping things that people don't need to keep. What you can do is look at the situations and see how you can give that person a sense of security in a way that is safe and meaningful in the current context. And I'd said this earlier before, that no matter what they say, sometimes somebody took this, that there is truth to that. If you live with somebody in a home, you've probably moved their things before. If they live in a facility, somebody's probably moved their things. Maybe somebody has taken their things. So it's when somebody says somebody took my stuff, it could be true. And responding to that concern is, and listening to them and say, okay, well, tell me about it. Having those conversations is really important because they don't know the difference between you moving something and somebody taking something necessarily. So, any questions or comments or clarifications at this point right now? Because I've been talking for a little bit. I want to check in to see if any of this, does this make sense to folks? Is this, and if not, I can continue on, but I just want to give that moment for you guys to ask. Okay, so there are probably as many solutions as there are problems, and some solutions won't work for you. And as those of you who are caregivers already know, that sometimes what works one day doesn't work the next day or the next hour. And so what I'm providing here, and there's different resources that you can find online that will provide you these tips as well. Take what works, and you'll come up with something that might work even better. These are just some suggestions. And one of the things I want to do is give a shout out to a book I bought years ago. I'm sure I hope he's updated it, but it's called The Complete Guide to Alzheimer's Proofing Your Home, by a fellow named Mark Warner. And I can put that in the chat if I'm multitasking, but he talks about, what to do in your home. This is what it looks like. Oh, where am I going? You can't see it, too close. It never works. I should take a picture of it and put it on. But he talks about, I bought this when I was the director of the Alzheimer's Resource Center, because I really found, it talks about specific things you can do in the home, but there is a section about behavioral challenges and talking about hoarding and stuff. And there are some good ideas in there. And some of these come from there. Some of these come from just other places, things I've seen work. And I think one of the main solutions that you may or may not want to hear, especially if you're living in the home of the person who now is doing these things, is you've got to declutter your life. You've got to, because if you want to find your stuff, you're going to have it in a place, you're going to have to declutter and kind of set up areas that are off limits to the person who might go through and rummage around them and move things that you don't need moved. But you have to also make sure that you create a space in the house that is totally on limits, I guess, that is their space to do whatever they need to do in it, and move things around and stuff like that. Because, and I know that seems hard, but things are going to move around. And the fewer items you have that are being moved around, and the fewer places to hide things, the easier it's going to be for everybody. One thing is keeping, not moving around, keeping things in the same place as much as you can, that where the person has always gone to get those things. Obviously, you want to keep all your valuables, documents, everything else. You want to have copies of those, but you also want to keep those originals in a place that cannot be gotten into, whether it's a safe deposit box or a lock file cabinet or whatever. Really, if you've got valuable things you don't want having moved around or misplaced, you need to store them in maybe a different way than you've been storing them. And then again, I said decluttering. And it does go, when I work with people who do hoard and their families want to help, sometimes family is really eager, to make decisions about what should stay and go. And often I will say, well, you focus on your stuff, you work on your stuff, and we'll work on this. So again, if you're living if this is a situation where you're living with a person, focus on organizing and decluttering and making safe your stuff, will also help with keeping it less available for someone else to move and lose. Have a space where this person can find their stuff. Label, if you can, label drawers, label things. And you can use words. Sometimes words don't work after a while, so you use pictures so they know what's in the drawer. Also, they recommend creating, putting locks on some things, so that I said you can put stuff that needs to be put safely away, but then allow that the other spaces can be rummaged through. and that nothing bad will happen, or you don't mind if those things get moved around. Think about where this person is most likely to hide things. I mean, sometimes you know them well enough and you could kind of figure out where they always put things. But again, if you could create a space, or if there already is a habitual space where they like to keep things, that should be their workspace, you know, where they can move things around and have things there, and you don't have to worry about it. If they're putting stuff in weird places and it doesn't matter, you know, certainly don't tell them they shouldn't do that. And sometimes you can leave it there if that's a place that they want to find it. A lot of this depends on that's home setting, and who's the caregiver and everything. But as much as you can, keeping things simple, and having that space where it's okay to move things around. I would start first by focusing on safety, obviously. That's where we start when we're just working with people who hoard, is that often, you know, people who have hoarding disorder but don't have a dementia are very reluctant to get rid of their things. They don't very reluctant to have you touch their things. And sometimes you really have to set up basic guidelines around safety. And sometimes that's the only place you'll get the agreement. Depending on how advanced a person's dementia is and whether you can get their agreement, you might have to be doing some of these things just because they have to be done, and you may not always be able to get their agreement. But you certainly should be explaining to them why safety is important, even if they may not understand it all. Look for hiding places around dangerous things. You know, before you turn on the microwave, what's in it? Although usually we don't turn on the microwave until we open it, but look in the oven. That's a good place to put things that we all preheat our oven. Well, better look. Some people can even hide things in, you know, the stove where the heater, the heating unit comes up, and put things under. So just make sure you're looking around these. Look for overloaded extension cords, make sure smoke alarms are working. This is an issue. This is a big issue. It is what's in the refrigerator and whether it's gone bad. A lot of times people cannot tell if food is bad, or they may think it's still good because they don't like to throw out food and they're going to eat it. So you've got to really keep an eye on that. And then, of course, locking up anything that should not be eaten, and is really important. It's time to get rid of all those throw rugs. Try not to have too much clutter on the stairs, and have clear pathways between rooms. You know, so I mean, these are basic safety things that are really critical. You don't want someone falling on top of you don't want somebody with dementia now also falling and breaking a bone or having to be in the hospital, because it's not the place for somebody with a brain impairment or memory impairment. And there's all kinds of additional things that will happen or could happen if somebody has to go in the hospital that will really lower their bar, that you may not be able to get them back to where they were. So you want to prevent all those things from happening. I probably mentioned this a little bit, but yeah, lock things up that you can't replace. Make sure you know where they are. Make sure, have a list of them. And getting duplicates of things that are often misplaced, like glasses. You know, if someone only has one pair of glasses and those are the glasses they need to see, what you do when they're hidden somewhere and you can't find them. You know, having some duplicates of some of these things that you have under control. You know, you've got your duplicate locked away somewhere, and yeah, they lose the ones they have, but you at least can say, okay, here they are. And I've talked about this, that you got to eliminate those hiding places, and to do that, you got to simplify your home. And I've just listed some different common hiding spots to look, for things. Some people don't end up hiding things. Some people feel perfectly fine just leaving things where they are, but to you, they may be hidden because they weren't put back where they're supposed to be, right? So some people aren't actually, hiding things because they're worried someone's going to steal it. They're just putting it in a weird place that you eventually have to figure out where that is. Having, it's like if you have a house or a space where you can look around and see when something's out of place, that's going to be a lot easier, because then you're going to see, oh, such and such isn't where it's supposed to be, or, oh, look, that's there and it's not supposed to be there. But if you have a lot of clutter, then you're not going to see those things. And the other thing is like thinking about like drains, people do put things in trash compactors and disposals and things like that. So you think about, if you're at that point, think about how you're going to protect the person from injury and the item from being ground to death. Putting latches or harder to open latches or locks on doors. A lot of what they talk about, and they've done this a lot in nursing homes, or have tried, is to make things look less inviting to go there. And then make the places that you want somebody to go and putter about and do stuff, make those look really interesting. So they're drawn to that, whether it's having all their favorite stuff there or whatever. But, and I know every setting's different and how well you can do that. Apparently mailboxes are good places to hide things. So they suggest getting a locked mailbox, and we should probably do that nowadays anyway. But it's a place to hide stuff. Then there's all kinds of technology. There's technology that you can actually put like labels on things that the app will tell you where those things are. So it's gone well beyond clap, clap, and the light goes on. This is like, which is my favorite technology. I don't have it, but it's like really, there's ways that you can track things, and sometimes, having again, this is something your family or the family involved, if you're a professional caregiver, has to be in agreement with, but the idea of having nanny cams or something, often I think if a person's is at this level, they probably shouldn't be alone necessarily. So that's really probably another. But if somebody has to be alone a little bit, and is still able to be alone, but you're just not sure, what happens, then doing something with that is an option as well. And then make the rummaging productive. Make in terms of productive, meaning the goal is that they feel safe and secure. So allow for people to have things that they're allowed to move around and feel productive and rummage safely. There might, like I said, have a space that they're allowed to move things around as much as they want, and then figure out what their hiding places are within that space, if there are hiding places, and so that you know where they are. And one person's cluttered and disorganized is another person's system. So, changing their system, if the way they're doing it isn't broke and it works for you, don't feel like you have to change it. Do remember that for people with memory impairment, if it's out of sight, it's often out of mind. And so they'll forget where they put it. The other side is sometimes if things are out of sight, they might not think about them anymore. So sometimes that is a positive. You can use that in a way to, as a positive, but generally speaking, people want, if they're feeling at all insecure or nervous about what's going on around them, they're going to want to have things around them that make them feel secure again. So even watching behavior, and if somebody's starting to gather things to them or move things around, then you might be thinking, oh, is he feeling, he seems, maybe he's stressed out, that behavior, maybe there's something going on with him. Maybe, the behavior always means something. It's the challenge and the detective is that for you to figure out what it means. Sometimes it means something, but it's not critical and it's just, they're happy, there's, but sometimes it could mean something more serious. So you just have to kind of watch behaviors and try to, scratch your head and try to figure out, okay, what could I try different here? Be prepared if you start moving things around that the person's going to react, and make sure you have supports for you in that process. Also think about having things planned for the person. If you have to do something around moving things around, make sure the person has somebody with them or distractions or something, so that they're not necessarily watching you, especially if you're removing things that you have to remove from the setting that might, they might not want you to. And this is tough, because if you're working with, when I work with somebody who has hoarding disorder but does not have dementia, I don't touch their stuff and I don't remove things. Well, I touch it with their permission, but I don't remove anything without a conversation. You're in a little different situation if the person may not be able to have that conversation and you're trying to make the place safe. The best you can do, I think, is to give them as good a reason as you can why, find some reason that makes sense to them why you need to get rid of this thing. Maybe, hey, we're giving it to the church, or, that they're whatever, something that would resonate from them. And sometimes you have to negotiate. The example here is, trade rotten or expired food for fresh food. Yeah, that seems like a good trade. But, you just have to, it's tough, because the other thing is this disease looks different in everybody. You're bringing the disease, the dementia that's impacting the person. There are different places. You're bringing in their resilience and their intelligence, their training, their history, their family, their trauma, all this stuff. So you're all dealing with a very different package of a person and a situation each time. So I would not say that you can take all these and say, well, Maggie said this would work. No, Maggie said, try this, it might work. Be creative. And the other thing too is, when you do remove discarded items, really remove them. Get them out of the house, because you don't want the person going back and rummaging and looking around for them, especially if they're in the garbage already. And, if they want to be involved, give them a box of something that they can go through and declutter. They may or may not spend a whole lot of time with it. Again, depending on where their dementia is, that might turn into more of a rummaging session than well, let's get rid of this session, but that's fine. Create boxes of things that the person might want to look through and rummage through and feel good about. They need that. They need, even old pictures or things like that. Don't, some things people need to feel like they're doing something, no matter what, no matter where we are in our mental health and our mental cognition. Oh, and definitely stop bringing stuff into your house. The less you bring in from here on out, or the less they bring in from here on out, the easier your job will be. So if you're in control of their spending, you might want to figure out how to monitor that, or how to, block some of it. You can get rid of junk mail and other things by going and putting your address in there. Having bills sent somewhere else to another address if the person grabs those and does something with them before you can. But stop, just, we've all got enough stuff for a while, and just that will help. And again, I've already said, if you live there, you're going to have to look at your stuff too. So I want to stop there and see if there's any questions. I have a bunch of, stuff about studies, which is interesting, but it's not necessarily what you might need. Any questions? I see stuff in the chat, so I'm going to open that up right now. Okay. Yes, slides. I will give the slides to Caitlin and she'll get them out to everybody. And Caitlin, thanks for posting the name of the book there. Oh, arguing. Oh, Susie's asking, are you going to touch on the point of arguing? If somebody feels they've lost something, it's not helpful. That's right. And that kind of goes to your question, Wendy, about what's called reality orientation. Reality orientation is not a useful practice because remember, the person that we're dealing with, they don't know that they're not right. They don't know that. It's not like they're walking around saying something they know to be wrong and they just need you to tell them what's right and everything will be fine. They don't know what they're saying is not right. How do you guys feel when you're right and someone comes up to you and tells you you're wrong? How do you feel about that? It's not, it's, you know, their reality is their reality. And so I don't recommend that. I recommend definitely, you know, having a conversation about the item. You know, sometimes if they are looking for something and it may have some charged emotional context, and you're right, it could have been gone a long time ago and they don't remember. Sometimes saying, well, tell me about that. Who gave that to you? Have a conversation about the item. And then, you know, have that validate, you know, that kind of validation that they are sad, they can't find it. Have that conversation and then slowly distract and go do something else. It's like, hey, are you hungry? I'm hungry. Or, hey, you know, let's do this. But validate. So I think if the therapy, you know, the validation therapy is validate the feelings, because that's what's really going on here is all these studies are saying, and for the hoarding piece of it, but we know this from other studies around just dementia behavior, is a lot of the behavior, they're searching for meaning, they're searching for understanding, they're trying to make sense of their world, which is super confused because their brain isn't tracking things the same way. So everything you can do to make them feel safe and secure and heard will help them feel those things. So if something's been gone or and if it has recently been stolen, I mean, I think, you know, for most part, most of the time, things are not being stolen, they're being misplaced or, yeah, I mean, in the home setting, most times things are misplaced. And just, you know, sometimes it's, well, we'll keep looking for it. We'll find it. Don't sweat it. You know, well, I'll keep looking for it and we'll find it. And, you know, you just have to see what response to their anxiety works in that moment. Just like you have to do with all your friends and family when they come to you without a brain impairment and are upset about something. You don't just say, you know, I've told you 100 times, that's gone. You say, whoa, you know, you seem really upset about this. You know, what could I do to help you? How can, you know, so I think if we treated, I always believe that if we treated everybody like we had memory loss and in a compassionate way, we'd have a better world, because we all need the same things. You know, we all need to be heard and feel secure. So yeah. So the book, Carrie, is called The Complete Guide to Alzheimer's Proof in Your Home. And it's by Mark Warner, W-A-R-N-E-R. And I have the 2000 edition, and I imagine that he's updated it. And I think the tech stuff, there's a lot of tech stuff in there has probably changed. Let's see, what do you've got? Any suggestion for reducing hoarding of communal things? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I wonder if, you know, I wonder what she thinks those things are. She's taken all the dairy creamers and she doesn't even drink coffee. Oh, you know when that happens. Okay, here we go. What do you guys think? Takes all the dairy creamers set out for residents, even though she does not drink coffee or use creamer. Yeah, what does she do with them, Jolene, after she takes them? Can you talk to us about it a little bit?
Does she need to unmute?
She would need to unmute.
I was putting it in the chat, but she puts them in plastic bags in her room.
Okay. And then they just sit
They just
there.
sit. Yep.
So she definitely doesn't want to see those wasted. She's saving them for something, but she doesn't know what they are anymore. I mean, if she knew what they were, you know, she doesn't need them. So that is definitely a sign of hoarding. It's, you got to wonder, you know, again, sometimes learning her history as to, is that something, you know, that, you know, finding out what she thinks they are, you know, having a conversation with her, you know, I think having a conversation and saying, you know, hey, those are creamers for coffee. You don't like creamer. That's what you told me or something, you know, and try to have a conversation and you know, let her know that when she takes them all, the other people don't have any. And see, you know, just sometimes the conversation, sometimes you just have to go back in the room when she's done that and when she's not in there and bring them back out and see if she notices and if that triggers anything. If she may not even notice.
So I am a little curious as to whether there may be a connection between her wanting to hoard things and wanting to give things to people, but not having access to things to give.
Yeah.
She's in a facility.
Yeah, that could be. And that's why I'd be curious to find out what she does with them afterwards. If she just never, you know, and maybe you can negotiate with her and say, could you just take 5 of those and let's leave the rest, or 3 or whatever. And, you know, ask her in a nice way, you know, tell me, what are your plans for that? Not what are you doing with those, but, you know, see if you can elicit any kind of answer to why she's doing it. But yeah, that might be, you know her, that might be that she feels like she wants to, maybe she wants to entertain people. And even though she doesn't drink it, she knows that her friends used to when they came for coffee. You know, who knows? But
Because it's the creamer, it's the salt and pepper, it's the newspapers, it's the anything that's kind of out communally, like for the facility.
yeah,
Take them all.
she'll take the whole thing.
I'll take them all.
Yeah.
Calipers, I mean, anything like that. So I'm just we're trying to mitigate that and help her understand that, yeah, when you take them all, then there's not any for anybody else.
Yeah, and she might be wanting to entertain. It's hard, you know, without really digging into why she's, you know, what she used to do in her life and how she used to, you know, but you might have some good insight that maybe she's thinking, well, I need these for when people come visit me. I don't have anything. You know, maybe letting her have some of them, or letting her take them, but then taking them out of her room when she's not in there, and, you know, see if she notices. If she does, then you have another tactic you have to go after. I see Ashley's hand is up, and then Lori after that. Ashley?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed the first part, but do you guys offer services that will help declutter homes, or do you refer out to the county? Or how does one go about getting that service provided for a client?
Yeah, so our agency has very limited services in this regard, especially around people who have hoarding disorder, because what it is really needed is a therapeutic intervention, and we aren't therapists. We could certainly help with the clutter, but we can't remove things from someone's home against their wishes and we're not therapists. So the county, through Adult Protective Services, does have some resources for people who may be at risk of losing their home because of this behavior. I have a side business that I do some work in that area, but it's not the main focus. And the county also has other resources, people they call in to help. Yeah, it's not, there's not a lot of good, the thing too is if somebody really is hoarding and hoarded before they got the dementia, then you've got the the double whammy here, and a therapeutic intervention may not work on them, and so that is more challenging, because if they have the history of hoarding and are going to be, it needs a little more, it's more challenging. And but the county does have some resources. Yeah, and most of the people who need this help don't have the resources to pay for the help. So that's the main vehicle I see right now. I know there are people, friends and family, who try to help, and I think sometimes that's what all that there's available for folks. And I can give some advice and some support, but I can't take the job. I mean, my side business can't. The amount of hoarding that is being done in our country, let alone, I mean, in this area, let alone the country, is phenomenal. And the resources just aren't there to manage it.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry, not a great answer. Was that Ashley? That was you? Lori?
Yeah, thank you.
I was just gonna say regarding this other woman, like just really the importance of trying to have some kind of a conversation with her, which might not be possible with dementia, but maybe with her family, because we're all going on the assumption that she's hoarding them to keep them, but maybe she's just cleaning up. Maybe she's just a very tidy person, and then you could redirect her like, oh, it's just more clutter in your room. These belong in the kitchen, put them in the bag, take them to the kitchen. I mean, it's still they're not available for the other residents. You can't spend all day chasing her, but it gets you along the line. So just kind of reinforcing that, having a conversation and joining, trying to figure out her reality, and then joining it and the solution, walking down her roads.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Lori. I mean, what makes this interesting, but also incredibly frustrating, is that there's no one way all the time that will work for everybody. It's a relationship based solution model. It's like you have to know the person, you have to know a little bit about why they do things. You have to have conversation, and sometimes none of that works, and sometimes you just have to be able to decide what battles you're going to fight. And sometimes the battle is you don't fight it, and sometimes you remove things when, again, and I would not sneak into a person who does not have a dementia and sneak into their home and remove things when they're not looking. I would not do that. But in a situation where they are hoarding and they do not remember what they have a cognitive disorder, you have to be more creative. And like I think Ashley said, or you have to find another solution, because they can't pile this stuff up in their nursing home room. Be thankful that they're all in packaging, and she's, because the people who wrap up their leftover food and take it and put it under their pillow or wherever they hide that is also very challenging. I know in homeless shelters here, there are people who, they're in the shelter now and they take food, and they don't want to throw out food because they don't know when they're going to be able to eat again. But it causes a problem in a communal setting. So yeah. Thank you for that, Lori. Any other? We're over. Sorry about that. Any other questions for me? Oh, I'm going to stop sharing. Sorry about that. I should have done that a while back. It's hard. You guys are doing hard work. And it's emotional but there are also still moments of laughter and joy and fun, because if you connect with those people, they're there, they are still there, and just keep connecting, because anything you do that makes them feel safe and secure will make your life easier also. Don't fight any battles that are not absolutely necessary. Save it for when it is what I would also say. You're welcome, Wendy. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Maggie. And I posted the link in the chat for where our past presentations can be viewed, as well as the slides will also be uploaded under that same link. And the presentation will be viewable on the HSRC YouTube channel as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.